So I will kick us off. Hi and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for our training Responsible AI for Community Health Work. My name is Katie Collins. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior program manager at Health Resources in Action. And we're very excited to bring you this free training, which is offered through the Community Health Training Institute, funded by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and brought to you in partnership between DPH and HRIA. I'm very excited for today's content. I hope you all are too, which has been prepared by some of our colleagues at HRIA, Erica Gaitan and Ben Wood. And we hope you leave with a better understanding of core questions to consider before using AI in community-facing work, what risks might be involved when using AI, and how it could undermine trust for the communities you work with. And finally, they'll leave you with some best practices for responsible community-aligned use of AI. At the end of today's training, my colleague Victoria will share an evaluation link. We really encourage you all to attend, all you attendees to fill out that link. It's a quick 3 to 5 minute survey and it really helps us strengthen the programming and ensure that our trainings meet your needs. Thanks in advance for that feedback and for your presence here today. We do have a live captioner with us, so if you would like to see captions, look for the CC Show Captions button on the bottom right-hand corner of your toolbar. If it's not there, you can click the More button to add it to your toolbar, or it might be a ... Once it's there, click that, and you should be able to see captions. Message us in the chat if you're having any issues. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Erica and Ben to introduce themselves.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces, lots of familiar faces on the call, and I'm excited to meet new folks. My name is Erica Gaitan, and I will be co-presenting with my colleague Ben Wood, and we're really excited to share a little bit about our ideas on building trust and accountability through thoughtful AI use, and also learn from you all because there are a ton of folks in the room with different experience, and so we're excited to have that conversation with you all as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Confirming y'all can see that okay?
Confirmed, looks good.
Okay, awesome. Just some quick housekeeping. So this is a 2-hour session. We'll see how far that we get. We hope to have some interactive activities, but we encourage you, to take care of yourself. If you have any questions, we're going to ask folks to stay on mute because there is a lot of folks in the room. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat and we'll be monitoring. So just a little bit about us. Again, my name is Erica. I'm the Associate Director of Community Impact on the HRIA team. Today I'm calling in from Texas. I am from Deep South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley and really proud to be from the borderlands. Millennials have been getting a lot of flack lately, and so I am a millennial, proud millennial, peak millennial, which I think really encouraged, Y2K and my interest in being a tech enthusiast. And so forever, I have been really into tech and in a professional capacity have had the opportunity to help organizations as they're thinking about emerging technology and how to do so in a responsible way. But more importantly, I am a social worker. I am a youth worker at heart. And I think that's where a lot of the cross intersections in this work happen, where I love tech, but I love being accountable and present and real with communities more than that. And I'm very passionate about bringing a social justice to the intersection of this work. And lastly, just some dislikes. This might be a controversial opinion, but I am not a fan of sweet and savory food combinations. I absolutely hate when my maple syrup touches my eggs. So, take it or leave it. That's my thoughts. Ben, I'm going to hand it to you to do some intros.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody. Ben Wood, Senior Director, Policy Practice here at HRIA. I also would find it disgusting if maple syrup touched my eggs, but I do like sweet and savory food combos more generally speaking. Thanks for all that, Erica. So just a little bit about myself, really, just to kick this off. I am from Ohio, but I have spent enough time in Massachusetts at this point to really be a reluctant Massachusetts sports fan. I am all in on the Patriots and the Celtics unless they're playing the Cavaliers. I have not yet taken hearts to the Boston Red Sox, though that's going to take another couple of decades of time. I am not a millennial. I am a resentful Gen Xer. Always resentful of the fact that those millennials and baby boomers are taking up so much bandwidth all the time in everybody's conversation. I'm a little bit old, so I'm a little bit of a tech skeptic, but I'm also really hopeful. And I'm hopeful because I've been in this game and this business long enough to know that we just need to keep trying new things to address those intractable issues that we have been trying to solve forever in our communities to create healthy communities. And I am a public health worker through and through. That is my academic background. That is my professional practice. I have been in the public health space for 25 years, almost 30 years at this point. And my dislikes are also potentially a little bit controversial. I love winter. I love the cold. I love the fact that this weekend it's going to be bone chilling, that we have potentially 12 inches of snow coming on Monday. I absolutely love it. And I'm a little bit of a hater on all those folks who don't like winter. All right, to pass it forward and really talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here. Katie did a good job of talking a little bit about what it is that we are hopefully going to get through today. But just to rehash this, we're going to try to identify core questions to ask before using artificial intelligence in community-facing work. We're going to have some conversation and give you all a framework for distinguishing low risk from higher risk AI use, and have you all engage in some small group conversation and work through some scenarios where you can practice some of that activity and thinking, and also have some conversation and some small group conversation around what really does support building community trust as we're thinking about using AI tools, how to apply best practices in using AI tools, and really thinking and centering community-based use. And if we have time, because all of these are truly aspirational, we're not entirely sure what we're going to get through. I will describe some key components of what organizations should consider when developing AI policies. Next slide. All right. So what is this session and what isn't it? So I just want to start by saying this is hopefully anyway not a space, or at least we're not intending this to be a space where we're debating whether or not AI should exist. It is sort of a fact of life at this point. It does exist. So really what we want to be doing is supporting critical thinking. So in our practice as public health folks, as folks who are working in community and trying to support community health practice, that we are being smart, intentional, and really centering good practices as we think about adopting AI in our day-to-day work. So what this is, it's a space to build discernment together. Really, what that means again is like developing critical thinking skills. What it is about pausing before using artificial intelligence and using good questions to ask ourselves before we use these tools, develop some shared language for decision making so that we can come into practice with each other around all of this stuff, and some practical tools for protecting our ability and how we are centering community trust in using these tools. It's not a tool demo. We're definitely not doing any product pitches. This is not a technical training session. Neither Eric or myself are AI technicians. Right? That's not our practice. It is not a specific compliance checklist to follow, because that's not what we want out of this conversation. We want to develop critical thinking skills. We don't want to have just, okay, here I do it here and I don't do it here. And accordingly, this is not a definitive yes or no rule book type of a session or conversation. I think with that, pass it over to Erica.
Thanks, Ben. We were really curious to get a feel of who's in the space, how folks feel about AI, and so we want to ask you to drop in the chat on this cat scale. How are you feeling about AI today? Just take a second, take a look at these adorable cats. And let's see it in the chat. Some skeptics, lots of eights. The seven. All right. So it looks like we got lots of skeptics, lots of folks who might be scaredy cats according to the photos. Nice. I love seeing this. Keep dropping them in the chat, but we were just wanting to see who is in this space and how folks are feeling about it. And we recognize that there's a lot of feelings about AI and those who are adamantly against it, those who are for it. And like Ben mentioned, we're not here to really judge the use, but we are here to discern and talk as a group and practice the skills of being able to understand when is a potentially right use case or not. So thanks. Keep them dropping on in the chat so that we can learn from each other. So I want to take a step back because AI can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so we wanted to share at the broadest level what we mean by artificial intelligence. So when we think about it in a big umbrella term, AI is really referring to computer systems that are designed to perform tasks that usually require human judgment. It's not a single tool or a product, it's a whole category of systems. So these are just some examples that we are already interacting with on a day-to-day. So when we think about like Siri or Alexa, that's AI. You know, you may have heard of terms like machine learning and deep learning. Those are also facets of AI. Think about your Netflix algorithms or when Google is telling us how much traffic there is to get to our destination. Deep learning is the next level further when we're looking at really complex tasks like language or the biometrics in our phone. There's AI in all of these components that we're using on a day-to-day. So I really like to think about it as like a vehicle. You know, when I say the word vehicle, that can include cars and trucks and bikes and planes. They all move us somewhere, but they work differently. And so the big picture is that what makes something AI is that it's learning from existing data and past decisions. Right now, the big focus is on generative AI. And so that's AI that's creating new content, whether it's text or images. So thinking about ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, or even Canva AI. So there's a lot of different AI systems embedded in our day to day. And it's also embedded in our public health applications that we're already seeing. And so when we're thinking about that big umbrella of AI, that's things like climate vulnerability mapping, or sometimes we're seeing automated scheduling and triage tools. Some of you may work in areas of benefits, and so AI is already being used for fraud detection or claims data. When we think about machine learning, that's really where we start looking at forecasting. How bad is the flu going to be this year? Or how can we try to predict where there might be heat-related risk trends? So all of these are examples that are coming up in our work as well. And Gen AI, which a lot of you may be familiar, is things like drafting outreach emails or our meeting transcripts and summaries or creating infographics of some sort. But today we are going to focus in on generative AI. So we're not going to cover any predictive algorithms that are scoring risk or automating decisions and that big AI piece. Those do have different ethical considerations, and they're not what most staff are encountering on a day-to-day. But with that said, we also think that these principles do apply. So even though our focus is generative AI, we want you to take these practices as you're thinking about the larger umbrellas of artificial intelligence. We know that AI is already showing up in our work, and they've really become part of our daily lives. And I think what's important and what we've already stressed is the discernment piece, and how to use them haven't really caught up yet. And so when we think about how it's showing up in your specific work, maybe you've seen things like AI drafting materials for you or creating content, organizing outreach, helping you schedule visits or plan community events, summarizing notes, so condensing meeting minutes, looking at research findings, or brainstorming ideas. So really being that thought partner, helping you think through engagement strategies, things like that. And we're curious again in the chat. how is AI already showing up in your work? How have you encountered it, even if it's informally? And so we're going to ask folks to take about 30 seconds. Tell us a little bit about it. Share in the chat what surprised you. Where have you seen AI? Has anything given you pause? And I'll ask folks to take a look at the chat so that we can see where our colleagues are coming into contact with it. So it looks like looking at grant applications, case notes, outlines. Yep. Brainstorm partner, meeting transcription, newsletters. So again, a lot of this falling into that Gen AI space of content generation, making things easier, streamlining for us. Google Translate, yep, research.
Improvisation partner. I love that one.
Yeah. And there's some folks who are saying that they don't use it at this point, which is perfectly okay. I think there is a lot of pressure coming from all over to adopt these tools. And if you're in the camp of it's too fast, too much, don't want to use them yet, that's perfectly okay too. Appreciate
There's
the
a question in there from Anna that she'd like to use it for data organization and analysis, but don't know how or if anyone has tool suggestions. I think this will be a great space for connecting, Anna. So through the course of the day, there might be some folks who will lift up some particular tools or be a point of connection. And we're also available after the session, maybe for some additional conversation too.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Anna, for the question. So I wanted just to point out that notice that many of us describe kind of informal or individual decisions related to AI use, and that's the reality that we're living in. And that's not to be a criticism. The reality is that when tech is moving this fast, we do see individuals adopting it a lot faster than policy or guardrails or organizational thinking. And so when we do that uneven adoption, we have some risks that come up. When we're using AI informally, we know that it's happening informally across organizations with little oversight. Adoption is varying really widely across some teams and individuals. Just like we saw in the chat, some folks are not using it at all, and some folks are being wildly creative of using it in their day-to-day. And that means that it can often be unintentional. And so decisions are being made quickly without considering broader implications. And so to make better decisions, we need to start understanding what AI can actually do well and what it doesn't do that well. And our goal today is to make these decisions more intentional and transparent and aligned with all of our work and community health work and the trust that is so central to all of our jobs. So just to understand what AI can do well, and sometimes really well and really impressive, because that helps us really think about why these tools are attractive to some folks. But the strengths are real and they're useful. Things like drafting and organizing text, which I saw in the chat quite a bit, summarizing information, so condensing really long documents or reports or transcribing things. Helping us identify patterns and finding trends in data and automating repetitive tasks. All of these are things that AI can do really well. But on the flip side, we know that AI can't do some things really well, and that's where a lot of your expertise in community health work comes into place. And so we know that AI is predicting patterns based on trainee data, but what it doesn't understand is that meaning. What does it mean? What are the power dynamics at play? What's the human experience? And so when we're thinking about context and power, AI can't understand who's holding authority, who's been marginalized, or why certain words carry weight in specific communities. AI doesn't have that lived experience, and so it has no access to the reality of things like discrimination, poverty, chronic illness, cultural identity, accountability. AI can't be held responsible for harm, and that responsibility really falls on the humans who are deploying it. The trust building piece. And so we know that all of our work, trust is central, and that relationships require presence and vulnerability and reciprocity. And those are things that AI can't provide. And lastly, that nuanced judgment. So knowing how to read between the lines and prioritize compassion over efficiency. And so there are a lot of limits in what AI can't do. And I don't want to minimize the strengths of AI because it is an attractive tool, especially in times where we're feeling really under-resourced. But that gap in the strengths and then the limitations is that ethical piece that is our challenge, doing that mechanical part, but misses that relational meaning. And so that's what we want to focus our work on. Why this matters in community settings. We know that harm can be relational and errors start adding up and they're subtle, but they're cumulative, excuse me. And that distance can slowly be introduced quietly, but it has huge implications for the trust in our work. So community members start absorbing that impact. It's not the tools or the users or the administrators that technology provides, but the community members themselves. And it can signal that distance. And so even when it's unintentional, the super polished language that you may be seeing, a lot of times people refer to it as like AI slop. Our community members, our clients, our partners, they're smart and they know when things feel inauthentic. And so that can really signal that distance. And those small choices end up compounding. So these shortcuts can become patterns that reshape how communities are experiencing care. So I just wanted to shout out this artist, Julieta Longo, who has this piece of art called Connected Yet Disconnected. And I feel like it really speaks to, we can be in close proximity to each other and still be completely disconnected. And we don't want that to happen when we're thinking about AI and technology and how we're using it in our community health work.
Eric, can I jump in real quick and
Sure.
share, joking that I'm old, but the fact is I have been working in the field for quite a long time. And just one reflection I've had thinking about AI over the past year or so is just how similar it really is to just a lot of experiences I've had in the practice of public health and the practice of community health over the past few decades. And as you were talking about how harms multiply and how the experiences of community and whether or not the practice of public health or the sort of the professionals in the community health space have built trust and whether or not those whether essentially whether or not people's experiences are multiplying. Those are things that have happened over time in history, right? And so we have an opportunity with AI to essentially sort of right some wrongs and to lean on our long history of understanding how best not to continue to exacerbate harm, how to really understand whether or not unintended consequences are being put out into our practice, and just lean on our old experiences and lean on everything that we've learned over the years. This is a rapidly evolving space, but we have a lot of the same tools. We have a lot of experiences to draw on to make it as positive as we possibly can.
Thanks, Ben. So I just want to start off with a community health scenario to see like where's people's intuition, what their intuition is in a scenario like this. So I want you to imagine you're working on outreach for mental health resources in Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. Someone uses AI to draft the message, and the text is clear, it's readable, it's grammatically correct, and it doesn't include anything obviously wrong. So on paper, this works, but what could still go wrong? So I'm hoping folks can drop in the chat. Can anything go wrong? What are your thoughts? Maybe too formal, the tone of translation, not personal, cultural translation. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we know, like, how many of you have received institutional communications that were just like technically correct, but they just felt off? I know I have. And so your thoughts and what you're saying in the chat is exactly what could go wrong in this scenario. There's nothing factually wrong, but something feels off, and we need to be in tune with that intuition because when we're using AI, that context can get flattened. So we're starting to lose that cultural nuance around mental health. We can start losing the language related to stigma and help seeking maybe overlooked or oversimplified. I also heard others mention being inauthentic, and that's exactly right, that voice can get erased. That authentic voice of community members can be replaced with this generic institutional language. So again, nothing wrong with it on paper, but it just doesn't feel real and it doesn't feel authentic. And then lastly, that distance can get signaled. So the message may feel disconnected from reality and what the community, who it's meant to serve. And so this isn't going to happen every single time, but it could. And so you need to be aware that when we're doing things, even though it's perfect on paper, there's real implications when we're sending things out with AI that we're not taking a critical look at. So we need to really think about the fundamental question is before we're using AI in any community health task, we need to shift from more of this permission-based thinking, like, can I use it, to more of the responsibility-based thinking of our commitments to our community and should we use it? So just because a tool can do something doesn't mean it's going to be the right choice for the situation. A quick example from the field. Now, this is an example of big AI, but I think it's really illustrative of some of the things that happen when we just kick the can and say, we'll fix it later. So I want to start with a story that should make us all uncomfortable. So in 1990, pulse oximeters, which are those little clips that people put on their finger to measure oxygen, we learned that it was systematically overestimating blood oxygen levels in Black patients. So they knew this since the 90s. And that's because these devices were trained on white skin and melanin absorbs light differently. So these were designed and tested on white skin. And so in 1990, we saw this, nothing happened, nobody asked questions. And then studies again, 20 years later in 2005 and in 2007, more studies came out, more peer-reviewed publication that said, hey, this is a huge issue. Nothing happened. Fast forward to 2020, and we all know that then COVID hit. And so, what did those faulty readings mean? Well, it meant that more Black folks, Hispanic folks, and Asian patients with COVID had lower oxygen levels that were going undetected more than 3 times than their white counterparts. And still, nothing happened. How many lives could have been saved had something happened? Somebody asked the question and not said, we'll just address it later. And it wasn't until 2022 that the FDA finally said, hey, this might be an issue. We should have some new guidance. And in 2025 is when we see new guidance issued regarding testing in these devices. So that's 35 years from problem to policy change to practice change. And what I just want to amplify here is that we can't afford to wait 35 years to get AI right. AI is scaling much faster than pulse oximeters ever did. And so the decisions that we're making in our organizations now and in the next couple of years are really going to set the trajectory for the next decade and moving forward in our community health use. And so some questions that we want to practice and we want to emphasize in this training today is that we're going to go through some practicing of some critical questions that we can all use and examine in our sectors, in our organizations. And if you can't answer these clearly, I think that's really a time to be able to pause and think. They're meant to slow you down productively. That's exactly the point of these. So the first question, who's affected by this work and who benefits? And that can be in, individual impacts, things like if you automate outreach, who might we miss? Is it just me, my team, or is it reaching community members? The second question, what data are involved? Am I sharing personal identifiable data or sensitive content? Even if we're not storing that data, are we pasting data into tools that might use it for training? The third question is what decisions are being influenced? And is this shaping access to resources, services, or opportunities? And decisions really include small decisions too. So if AI summarizes meeting notes, for example, what's getting emphasized or what's getting left out? Question 4 is who is accountable if something goes wrong? So, can I name the person responsible for reviewing or responding to harm? I don't know is not an acceptable answer here. Someone must be accountable. And then the fifth question is can this be reviewed or reverse? So, can we unpublish it? Is there a human checkpoint before final decisions are made? Can we correct it? Can we apologize? Or is this permanent? So these critical questions are really meant to be that pause, that check to say, hey, we can jump into this quickly, but it's worth pausing and being productively slowed down to make sure that we're getting it right. Ben, anything that you'd add here?
No, Erica, I don't. That's great.
Okay, cool. So next, we're going to start practice applying these questions and the scenarios and the activities coming up. But we also wanted to make clear that the AI risk, that things happen on a spectrum, it's a continuum. And so it's not really three separate boxes. And we want to encourage folks rather than thinking on binary terms, like, is this allowed? Is this not allowed? Really thinking about AI use along the spectrum of risk. And different uses are going to require different levels of caution and oversight and human review. So when we think about lower risk, that might be things like brainstorming or meeting note drafts or non-sensitive information, or moderate risk. That's more things as we're thinking about workflow support tools or internal processes or template generation, all the way to higher risk of community-facing materials, anything involving decisions, so eligibility, sensitive data, and risk isn't contextual. The same task can move across the spectrum depending on who's affected, what data are involved, and how the output will be used. And so those 5 questions that we just went over helps us determine where on this spectrum any given use case might fall. So I want to pull out an example that Ben and I were talking about yesterday of like what can go from low stakes and then high stakes, like what could be an example about that. And so maybe brainstorming ideas for a staff meeting, that might be considered low risk. But if we start brainstorming ideas for how to talk to grieving families, that quickly goes to a higher risk scenario, right? And not saying that that's completely wrong, but we need to be cognizant that the same task can quickly jump up the risk spectrum very quickly.
Okay.
Go for it, Ben.
Yeah. Erica, thanks so much for all of that framing and for that incredibly powerful example. We do actually have one question. I'm going to take it. And it's from Renee.
Thank you. I just wasn't sure. Did you want us to hold our questions until a specific time or ask as you go?
Actually, I think given the volume of folks who are on this session, Renee, and for everybody, it would be great if you put your questions into chat. That way we can sort of understand the best way to
Okay.
integrate them and answer them throughout. How does that sound?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, Erica, one thing you said, I just put this into the chat, and if there's one thing I'm going to take away from this, and I hope other people take away from it, is this really sort of simple but powerful concept of slowing down, but slowing down to be productive. I really love that very simple concept, and that's what we're hoping you all do, and we're gonna sort of try to do some practicing and thinking about this. So. What we're going to do is go into some small group conversations, and really the purpose here is to build some muscle memory for what responsible AI use really can mean in your own specific contexts, and really understanding that there, and Erica is really highlighting this, that there isn't a single right answer in how you're going to do this. What matters is developing your own way and your own practice of thinking through uncertainty with some care. And fundamentally, what we're trying to get across is that responsible AI use is less about the specific tools, and it really is more about decision making under a heck of a lot of uncertainty that we're all dealing with right now. So we have these 3 scenarios for you. We want you to consider each of them. These scenarios are written so that they're intentionally incomplete. So if you're finding it hard to decide sort of where they exist on this particular risk spectrum that Erica was describing, that's great. That's a really a good sort of discussion point. If your group is disagreeing about where it falls on this risk spectrum, that's incredibly valuable. Again, that's good conversation to be having. It's not about resolving anything in these conversations. It's great to have disagreements, and we're not trying to get to a correct answer. Really focus on what problem is you're trying to solve, and really sort of centering who is bearing risk versus who is gaining efficiency in any given moment. You'll have these discussion prompts that you see on the screen available to you in your small group conversation. So we want you to think about each of the scenarios and where they're falling on the risk spectrum, what specific concerns are coming up in your conversation, what questions would you need answering further before proceeding with the decision about whether or not you think this is low risk, high risk, etc., and what safeguards would be appropriate. So we're going to put you into groups, but actually what I want to do right now is just read each of these really briefly. So we speak them out into the space here, and then you can go into your small group conversation. So this first one is about using a meeting notes assistant. So the situation: your team has monthly community advisory board meetings with 12 to 15 participants. These meetings generate dense, important discussions, but someone always gets stuck taking detailed notes, which means they can't fully participate. A staff member suggests using AI to transcribe the meeting audio and generate a summary of key points and action items for internal team use only. So we're going to ask you, have conversation. Where does that fall along the risk spectrum? Use your prompt questions to really sort of dig into what kind of concerns are emerging. So that's scenario number one. And the next one is this social media campaign generator. So the situation: your health department is launching a campaign about pediatric dental care. The communications person is overwhelmed with multiple campaigns and asks AI to generate a month's worth of social media posts from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., promoting free dental screenings for kids under 5. The AI produces 20 posts that are accurate, engaging, and include appropriate hashtags. They plan to schedule all 20 posts with minor edits. Again, use your discussion prompts, have some conversation. Where does it fall along the risk spectrum? What kind of concerns are emerging, etc. So what we want you to do in your small groups, I'm sorry, there's a third. That's right. So the translation services shortcut. So the situation: your organization it serves a growing Somali refugee community. You have English language fact sheets about prenatal care, WIC enrollment, and lead poisoning prevention. Staff are waiting weeks for professional translation services. A program manager suggests using AI to translate materials into Somali just to get something out there quickly. I bet a lot of people have heard that before in their workplaces, while professional translations are in progress. The AI translations read clearly to the one Somali-speaking staff member who spot checks them. Again, where does that fall along the risk spectrum? What kind of concerns are emerging? What other sort of things do you want to be lifting up to know whether or not you want to actually move forward with this? All right, so those are 3. And we're going to put you into groups of 4. And we want you to go through each scenario sequentially. So have conversation about each. We'll give you time checks. In the chat, we're going to be putting those scenarios and the discussion prompts. Oh, it looks like they're already in there. Victoria, can we also just put the actual language, not just the screenshot, so I'm not sure if people can read those very well or not. So you'll have them with you, and good luck. I hope you have fabulous conversations. And Victoria is going to start putting you into groups right now. I hope you had some good generative conversation, and we didn't cut you off too quickly. Before we do a little bit of debrief, thought we would just lift up a couple of these comments and questions that we saw in the chat. I'm just going to lift up Anna's comment here around, I'll just read it. I think it's important that risk is defined by who or what it affects. Meeting note drafts may be low risk for humans, but what is the risk to the natural resources, water, and energy being used to generate those notes? Anna, thank you so much for that comment. Environmental impacts of artificial intelligence technology are real and consequential. And it's not something just to sort of brush aside at all. And I think one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is the again, sort of leaning on our long history in public health practice of understanding um, how to understand differential impacts on communities of various types of technologies or industries. We want to lean on those experiences and those tools for AI use as well, right? So if we're thinking about data centers being sited in communities, where are those data centers typically being sited? They're being sited in environmental justice communities. They're being sited in the communities that are routinely put at harm by other types of industry and have been for decades and over history, right? And so there are tools that we have at our disposal as public health professionals to characterize risk, to use data, to convene community, to use tools like health impact assessments to lift up concerns, to predict risk, to predict harm, and to try to influence policy and decision making. So we really want to consider all those risks and use the tools that we have at our disposal to address them. And I did want to lift up related to this topic, this wonderful blog that Erica wrote. Exactly on this topic of environmental harm and AI data centers for people to read and peruse at their leisure. And Erica, I think you were going to respond to Renee's question.
Yeah, so Renee, thanks for the question. Renee asked in the pulse oximeter example, could you clarify that AI missed the need for review of race? Actually, that was a more clinical, healthcare focused example, with the point being that us referring to just like we'll fix it later doesn't work, especially when technology is going as fast as it is in the adoption. So it's not necessarily an AI example more than it is the fundamental issue of not pausing to really look and think about the red flags. And then the second question, Renee asked in the list of 4 questions, could you expand on question 4? What do you mean by responding to harm? That's a great question. So let me share my screen one more time. And I think the big takeaway here, Renee, is we need to figure out who's responsible if something is incorrect. So in the example that we went through, if something is translated incorrectly or information goes out that is wrong, who is responsible for fixing that harm? How are we making sure that things are legit, that we're naming responsible folks to review, and that if things are incorrect or decisions were made by AI that weren't checked by humans, how are we going to respond accordingly? So it really is that piece of the I don't know how this came about isn't acceptable, but really somebody must be accountable for the outputs that we're sending out into the world if they're AI generated. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
Ben, back to
Yeah,
you.
thanks. Thanks, Erica. And actually, can you bring up scenario 1?
Yep.
So just want to do some real quick debriefing here, folks. We don't have the time to do robust conversation, but really just curious about some of the key takeaways that people had. So maybe just as like a way to pressure test this, just show of emojis, thumbs up. Um, who amongst your group had this scenario as low risk? Not a ton of low risk. That's interesting. So folks were considering this probably sort of more in the medium to high risk space. Wondering if folks want to put into chat, like what are some of the specific concerns that emerged?
Or if someone feels compelled to speak into the space, we'd welcome that too.
Inaccurate summaries, whose
I
voices might be misrepresented or minimized. Sorry, Cherry, when you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say sometimes AI does not hear correctly, like the pronunciation of someone who is, an immigrant and speaks differently. There are times that AI just hears something else, and then that is recorded as a response, and then it also hears ums and every little detail that spoils the accuracy of the meeting minutes.
Super helpful. Thank you. All really important considerations. I'm also seeing a lot of really good considerations people are putting into the chat. I just want to lift up one here from Angela. How does having a transcription impact how people show up and participate in a meeting space just by using it? Maybe you are literally making it a space in which people do not want to come in and participate in. And what does that do to the work that you're trying to do? Really great considerations. Any other really important takeaways that people have for scenario one that they want to share? Maybe some safeguards that would make it feel like it was an appropriate use for you all. And feel free to jump in. Yeah, Candy, thank you.
Hi, Candy. So we discussed that maybe put a process in place where things can be approved, or it will have like a point of person that will go to first and then another second person to have it approved and for accuracy.
Wonderful. Great consideration. Great safeguard. All right, let's maybe jump on to number two, scenario number two. So what about this one? Where did people land? High risk, low risk, medium risk? Where were people landing? High risk. All right, there we go. Low and high. Candy, if you don't mind, why did you say low?
Why did we say low? Social media is social media. We don't, I think low, maybe the impact is not as high. Like let's say the third scenario for us that was considered a high. I'm not sure if anybody else on the team wants to add to it from our group.
Sure, I will add. I think because it says as part of the scenario that that it produced accurate, engaging, and it had the appropriate hashtag. So that tells me that somebody had the opportunity to look into it and identify that those were accurate and had the appropriate content. So because there was that step of somebody fact checking, making sure that it looked appropriate, that's why I would consider that it's not medium or high.
Yeah. Thank you, Karina. Any group that had discussion and put this as a higher risk use want to tell us what your conversation was like? Daryl.
We had a conversation about what community it was serving, and we realized that if the oximeter was used by a white person, like this was probably made for a community of white people. It wasn't for like and we also figured that the communities of color aren't receiving campaigns about pediatric dental care. So we figured that it was a more of an affluent and mid-range community. It wasn't really for a low risk community for children under 5 to get free dental screenings. And AI, I mean, if you have to really look at the editing, you really have to edit it well if you're going to produce something that's going out in the community, if you're going to use it. So I think minor edits, whether the post was accurate, engaging, include appropriate hashtags, wasn't fit for every community.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot you just said there. There's like a ton to unpack about like biases that are built into the way in which AI is crafting the message and really not really understanding the full consequences maybe of all those biases that it is using, about whether or not it's being actually useful for reaching communities that actually need these types of services more, right? And also like whether or not it's contextual, if it's population specific enough, if it's community specific enough. Thank you, Daryl. They're all incredibly important considerations. Any Anybody want to lift up some safeguards or some other types of considerations or practices that you'd want to put into place for this particular use case? D'Andrea.
Hi, yes. There's a few things that I would put into place. I would say for specifically talking about New York City, we should look at the holidays, like what holidays are happening within that month or in that week we want to do posts. You need to specify which platform you're doing the post for, because we discussed that different age groups use different platforms and how you communicate that. You can use slang with the same slang I use on my Instagram posts with my younger groups, or even Twitter. I will not use on Facebook because I tend to have the older population on there, 55 and up. And then also more Facebook is more for like updates. I know, like breaking down and explaining, whereas Twitter, Instagram are quick posts, so you can't use the same language across all platforms. Then again, just cultural nuances. Again, are there any specific holidays? Do we want to shout out a specific group? And then, so when you're putting in your request, I would say you have to add very specific language when you're doing so. It's not create 20 posts for this campaign. It's create 20 posts for this platform, for this age group, for this specific month. Like, it has to be very specific versus just a very general, like, give me an outline. I also said I would prefer to do recommendations, like recommendations of hashtags, and then I create my own versus creating one altogether, because then I can easily input that information where I want it versus me having to take things away, which takes up more time.
Such
I
great
love
points.
all of those, and you're really highlighting some of the important principles and considerations. One of which is that ending one, which is, hopefully these tools are used as brainstorming partners and those really good interns, but not as the only thing that you're using to make to make decisions or come to your products. Karina, you wanted to lift something up?
Yes, after I raised my hand, she added a couple of things that I was going to say, but I think that AI, it's evolving by the second, right? It's so smart. So I think as long as we take control of what we're doing, what we want to get, we may be able to get, no, we will get good results. And I say that because we have to be very specific sometimes and very careful with the prompts that we provide to the AI platform that we're using. So like you can even tell the AI platform, like pretend that you are a communications expert and I want you to do this and this and this and that. But keep in mind that this is the target population that we are trying to keep in mind. So as long as you feed it everything that you as a professional already know, because you just don't have the time, right? The bandwidth to do it. So as long as you take the time to do that prompt, and specify as much as you can, I think that you can get very good results. And then of course, towards the end, then you have to have that fact checker or that other professional, or you can take the time to double check that what was produced is what you want, and then tweak it if it wasn't. So I think that's what it is. Take the time at the beginning to create a good prompt and be very specific, and then take time towards the end to make sure that what you're getting is what you want, based on your knowledge and your background and your experience, your expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great points, Karina. What I'm hearing is like we're trying to get away from this like generic institutional voice, right? And so this may not be immediately harmful, but it does risk eroding the trust if we just sound very generic, if we don't have the populations in mind, like D'Andrea was talking about. And what I wanted to take away from this scenario is like volume doesn't always equal engagement. So we may have 20 generic posts and those might perform worse than like 5 authentic ones. So let's put in the work, like you're saying, Karina. Let's get it right at the start so that we're not just putting like this slop out into the world.
Can I also lift up what Milana put into the chat here? And my 23-year-old does this all the time. It, they are clocking AI generated content constantly. And when they do, they write off that source completely, right? So it's that like the immediate harm is then that they have lost trust in that particular source of information or that organization. And so the next time maybe they're coming back with better information, they've already been written off, right? Um, Milan, I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and share any of your perspective and why you lifted that particular comment up.
So I'm a librarian, and we're often coming from an information literacy standpoint. So it's important for our patrons to know the difference. And if we're teaching them how to spot things, and then we were to use AI to make that type of post, it would be kind of contradictory and erode some of the public trust.
Thank you. All right, in interest of time, let's move on to this third scenario. So how about this one, folks? Low risk, medium risk, high risk. Where was your conversation landing? A lot of highs, a lot of highs, a lot of highs. I think that was the intent. That's what we were actually going for. Anybody want to come off mute and share a perspective on some of the rationale for why this is a high risk use case?
So, hi, Colleen. The group that I was in, we were just saying like so much can go wrong with the translation. Like if it translates words incorrectly and somebody doesn't catch them, like you don't know what you're saying or what you're putting out there. It could be very damaging.
Yeah. Well, in what ways did you guys talk about any specific ways that it could be damaging?
I mean, nothing specific, but I mean, you depending on how you phrase things, I mean, it could come across as, rude, sarcastic, demeaning.
Thanks, Colleen. Anna.
I'm wondering what people would do. I'm interested in people's perspective on the urgency of like the prompt was that they've been waiting weeks for this material, and is this leading up to a public event where like let's say it is is there greater risk in having no information to share versus having incomplete or inaccurate information and then the trust loss there? How I'm curious how anybody here would like approach that alternative.
Anna, that's what where I was kind of coming from. Just I do like prevention, and we have like a lot of information in different languages, but also the fact if it's been like a couple weeks and they're not getting the information, that's like an access issue. And I know it's not great to rely just on one Somali print. It could not be translated, but there's I think some information or at least basic information. If there's a way to get some information out there, I just think that's again, some information is better than no information at all. That was kind of where I was coming from.
Right. And I think back to like, there is no right or wrong answers because that tension is really real, Katie. Like, staff are frustrated, the community has urgent needs, but the risk of harm is also significant. And so that's where your team needs to pause and weigh the pros and the cons. Thinking about things like on the logic of like better than nothing. In this case, what happens if someone makes a decision based on a wrong translation? Does bad information create harm and undermine trust? And I think every scenario is going to be a little bit different. Maybe the alternative is like to call and talk to people or delay distribution or request emergency resources for rush translation. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I think that it has to be explicit to name it. Where we need to demand shortcuts because it's necessary or where it's worth it to wait because the risk is too high. And that goes back to that question 4 that we're trying to walk through is like, who is accountable if something goes wrong in that situation? And what we're trying to get at is the answer can't be the AI. It has to be thought out by your team of let's do it. It's worth getting the piece of access down And if something goes wrong, here is our game plan.
Incredibly helpful, Erica. Karina, I just want to check. Do you still have your hand up because you wanted to make a comment, or had you not put it back down? That's what I thought, maybe. All right, good. Renee, you have
Just
a
real
question,
quick,
comment?
just to piggyback on this situation, the other piece too is while somebody's first language, say, might be Spanish, but yet they're able to speak English, and I'm speaking to, say, in a healthcare situation, it's already been touched on that the expressive language might be very, very good, but their receptive language, which is not their first language, English, may not be very good. And when you're speaking about healthcare and medical needs, that can be a really scary thing. So just being careful around that piece too.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And that was, I think, what Eric was lifting up in the chat. Like, literally, what if someone is taking this information is going to make a health decision based upon a wrong translation, and it's that can have obviously incredibly immediate impacts. Noel, your comment is heard. It seems as if we are working in a Somali community. We should have more than one Somali staff person on whom we can rely for translation checking. That is a fundamental question, and not necessarily related, obviously, to AI practice, but incredibly important for our core public health practice. All right, moving on. So just some like takeaways here before we jump into the next section. I'll just say like a lot of what I heard across a lot of the comments across all three scenarios is related to trust and how we are um, building trust by the practices that we're engaging in, and how we're building trust amongst ourselves, our staff, and ultimately the folks we're trying to engage with and the communities that we serve. And that's good because that's what we're going to have more conversation about in the next section of this training. But just some key takeaways, what we just practiced, pausing before use. This is critical. Again, going back to Erica's comment of slowing down so that we are productive and actually effective in what we're trying to accomplish. Weighing those trade-offs. A lot of what you were all talking about were trade-offs, like how can you use these tools and how can you put in good safeguards. So recognizing that efficiency gains do come with true costs, but that there are some effective safeguards that we can employ so that we can mitigate those costs. And centering impact. And again, this goes back to core public health principles and practice, asking who bears the risk versus who's saving the time, right? And who is just gaining some efficiency. So thank you all for that conversation and engaging in it so thoughtfully. And I'll pass it over to Erica for the next section.
Thanks, Ben. And the last comment I wanted to make on this is just I want to notice how hard some of these decisions were. And I think that's really appropriate. If it feels easy, we're probably missing something. And so, we talked about things like things feeling instinctive, and then other times where groups thought that scenarios were fine and others had a lot of pause. And I think that's the kind of thinking that we need. We need it to be visible, we need it to be explicit, and we need it to be discussed. Because our key point here and our goal isn't that there's universal agreement amongst our teams, but it's about making decision making more transparent and intentional. So now I just want to talk about a few best practices that can guide some of these decisions as you're going through it. AI use isn't about perfection. It's about building these small, consistent habits that compound over time. And these are practices, they're not policies. And so I also want to emphasize that your organization may have different safeguards, different guardrails, things that you can and can't do that you have to abide to. And so we're really focusing on, as an individual, these are practices that I can take that are more concrete and actionable. So the first is human review required. We've talked about this extensively, but it's more than just a spell check, right? It means really asking, does this feel right? Is this how we talk? Is there anything missing? Sensitive data. So right under that, how are we protecting that? We never want to feed sensitive or identifiable information into tools that weren't designed with appropriate security measures. Some of our institutions may have enterprise tools that may have more safety built into them. As an example, we use Microsoft Copilot and we have safeguards around that. And so that is some more appropriate security measures, but we don't want to be using these free tools and dropping these sensitive data into it that can really put our communities and our clients and partners at risk. We want to support and not replace. I saw this in the chat, is that AI is our thought partner and not a decision maker. So let's think about it like that. First draft and not final word. We need to be using our professional judgment, like Karina was saying, where it's a tool and it's not our boss. It's a tool that we're using, and we should be the bosses of these tools. And then lastly, documentation. This doesn't have to be anything fancy, even a shared Word doc where people are using, like saying, like, I used AI to draft this and it was reviewed by Y. All of these practices make visibility more prominent. And so we want to make sure we're documenting our processes, keeping track of how and where AI was used, especially for community-facing work. And that can be, like I said, a really simple log or even a note. And there's times where we're going to feel like AI is not the responsible choice to use in our work. And I think that's totally okay, because the responsibility to our communities also includes restraint. And so choosing not to use AI in an active decision that deserves as much respect as choosing it thoughtfully. And so we really think that if you're deciding on a specific scenario and you think that it's not appropriate, like, that's responsible use. And that's restraint is also responsible use. And restraint is also professional judgment. It's not us being anti-tech, but again, what we've talked about this entire training, it's that pause, it's that honoring the trust that we've spent our careers and decades building. And so some scenarios where AI may not be the most appropriate is that when trust building conversations need to happen. And we want to emphasize here, like, direct community engagement really requires that authentic human presence and can't be automated or just have templates. And so when I'm thinking about community advisory meetings or focus groups or door-to-door outreach and canvassing, like, the whole point of that is that human presence is the point. That's what we're doing. That's the task at hand. And so AI wouldn't be appropriate when that's the key driver of what we're trying to do. Culturally sensitive content. And so that's when we're thinking about materials that require deep cultural understanding and community voice. They should be created with and not for the communities that they're meant to serve. And so that includes the translation scenario from earlier. We're thinking about content that's addressing historical traumas or anything where getting it wrong causes harm. That might be a scenario where we don't use AI. And then lastly, any kind of high stakes decisions. So that's anything that can make folks ineligible for benefits or referrals or risk assessments or anything with legal implications. That's really a space where we want to pause and put the brakes when decisions are high stakes and they could really impact the care that someone's getting. So the point of this is, like, saying no, it's not a failure. Even though we're getting pressured from all over to adopt these tools, sometimes it's wisdom. Wondering if there's anything that folks would add to this list of when not to use AI that we didn't already mention. We got a question, why log use? And Stephanie, that goes to the point of just being able to verify and track, especially with your internal teams, of knowing, I may draft something and send it to Ben, but Ben doesn't know that it was AI generated and he sends it somewhere else or sends it elsewhere. So we want to just have that transparency of being able to practice logging what we did, who verified it, so that it's central to our internal team processes, especially. I'm going to skip over this. So we have another activity here. AI is a no-no anytime you're analyzing and interpreting data. Thanks, Rebecca. Noelle, anything that verges on plagiarism. Yeah, we've seen that AI can extract info like verbatim without appropriate attributions. Thanks. Creating code. Awesome. So we have another activity to really have that gut check on trust and you talking to each other about would these scenarios build or break trust. Again, there are no right or wrong answers. So Ben, I'm going to let you set us up for this one.
Awesome, Erica. And again, thanks for all of the framing context and content there. And folks, we're trying to do our best of identifying when you're putting questions in the chat and reacting to them, but also kind of losing track at this point of, of all of them. So if there's anything burning, either put it back into the chat if we haven't come to it, or raise your hand if you want to make sure we have some conversation around it. But we're gonna have you all go back into small group conversations right now, and really just continue this this work of practicing and then having group conversation and considering. So this activity, as Erica was describing, and we're practicing what builds or could break trust. We're going to look at AI generated text that Erica came up with that is factually accurate. So just for the sake of this exercise, just assume or trust us that the words there are factually accurate. It's just going to help us and help you just engage in conversation around some other key considerations. But whether it's factually accurate or not, it may signal some sort of distance from community. It may erase particular voices. Or it might undermine trust in many other ways. So what we want you to do in your small group conversation, we want you to decide whether or not you would send it as is, whether you would revise it, or you would reject it entirely. If you want to revise it, have some conversation about what you would want changed and why. Again, if you reject it, explain what approach you would take instead. All of the responses, all of the decisions you make around that are, of course, valid. There's no correct answer to any of this. This is all, again, about critical reasoning, thoughtful conversation. So just some key considerations for your discussion. Look out for assumptions that are embedded in language. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to whether or not the language is signaling some sort of, again, distance from community or authority in ways that you think are problematic. Whether or not the language is it loses some specificity or particular types of voices, and whether or not you sort of feel whether it's institutional language, whether you feel it's community language, and sort of why. How is that showing up? In your conversation, also, just remember the following. Assume accuracy is not the issue. As we've been talking a lot about, trust is relational, right? It's not technical. Clarity is not the same thing as actually connecting with people. I think, as we all know at this point, AI often defaults to some institutional voice, but we really want you to try to identify maybe how you're seeing that. So we're gonna maybe just read these two pieces here, and I don't know if anybody else wants to come off mute and read this one, so I don't have to read it. Anybody want to do that?
I can.
All right, Charles.
Community Health Partners is pleased to announce a COVID-19 and flu vaccination clinic on Saturday, November 18th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Lincoln Elementary School. That's at 435 Oak Street. The convenient opportunity provides free immunizations for all eligible individuals. Walk-ins are welcome, though appointments are encouraged to minimize wait times. Our professional healthcare team will be available to address any questions or concerns. Vaccines are safe, effective, and recommended by leading health authorities. Protect yourself and your loved ones this season. For appointments, call 555-0123 or visit our website.
That was amazing, Charles.
Charles, are you on the radio, Charles? Have you done this
That was
before?
great.
That was
Awesome.
that was definitely pro material right there. Anybody else feel brave enough to do this next one around home visiting? Erica, you want to advance the slide? All right, we got a brave soul. Who's it going to be?
I can read it.
All right, Laura.
Our evidence-based home visiting program offers comprehensive support for expectant mothers and families with young children. Trained professionals provide individualized guidance on prenatal care, infant development, nutrition, and parenting strategies. Services are provided through regular home visits tailored to each family's unique needs and circumstances. The program utilizes evidence-based curricula proven to improve child outcomes. Participants receive educational materials, referrals to community resources, and ongoing supports through their child's early years. Enrollment is free and confidential. To learn more about eligibility and enrollment, contact our intake coordinator.
Wonderful, Laura. Thank you both so much. All right, we're gonna put you again into groups of four. It's gonna be a different group of four. Hopefully we don't have too many tech issues, but you know, it's gonna happen, but we'll problem solve for it if it does. Erica, you came off mute. You want to say something?
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
good.
All right.
Keep going.
All right. And so like your task here, just sort of say it again. We want you to decide if you're going to send this as is, revise it, or reject it entirely. If you revise it, explain what you changed and why. If you reject it, explain what approach you'd take instead and go through each of them. All right. Katie?
Just in case anybody, if the chat didn't come through when you went into the breakout rooms, maybe copy the scenarios now before we send you into breakout rooms. So just calling that out just in case. Sorry about that happening last time.
Cool. And this will be about 10 minutes in your group. So let's try to spend no more than 5 minutes on each scenario.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good conversation. We're just going to take a few minutes here, literally, I think just a few minutes at this point, just do some real quick debrief. So, vaccine clinic announcement. Anybody want to share some highlights, whether or not you going to send it, reject it, revise it, and some key considerations? Anybody want to lift up something that
Yeah.
they want to share from their conversation? Colleen.
Yeah, we definitely said we would revise it because it says we're doing the COVID one, right? I'm looking at the right one.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
I raised my hand.
So it says for appointments, call or visit our website, but there's no website. So you don't know who you're messaging. And then the thing I thought was that I don't know if it was just me, but I felt that the way that they put like vaccines are safe, effective, and recommended by leading health authorities. It's like they're trying to like sell it. I don't know. It seems odd the way it's phrased, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of reads like a press release, right, Colleen? So like
Yeah.
not communication with the community.
Thank you. Colleen, Kyle?
Our group decided that we would scrap this entirely, because you can shorten this significantly and turn it into bullet points and make it a lot more clear, a lot more concise, and keep the same information without needing all the superfluous information.
All right. That's great. Candy.
The part that stood out the most is it's free, but you might not be eligible. And that part, like, what are the things that will make me eligible? I don't want to show up and then just to be turned around and send me out the door again. And also and the other in our group we were talking about somebody brought up right now the vaccines are safe and effective. Protect yourself and your family. And I don't know that I was saying in the other group that I don't know why that doesn't vibe with me, I guess. And now I know why. And it's similar to the vaccine are safe and effective. It's kind of gimmicky, I feel. That's why it doesn't settle well. But that was my opinion. Somebody else said that they really appreciate that part about protect
Mm.
yourself. For me, it just now that I heard, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, but it just felt like the same thing. It was like very gimmicky.
No, I mean, and that's great, of course, because people are going to interpret this differently. I love lifting up the all eligible individuals piece that talk about something that could completely erode trust. So that thanks for lifting that one up. We're gonna move on to this next one, home visiting program. Anybody want to share some highlights from their conversation about this one? Reject it, revise it, keep it, send it. Yeah, Colleen.
So we also we were kind of on the revise, maybe scrap it. Same thing on this. This is to learn more, contact our intake coordinator, but there's no information on who that is. There's no phone number, there's no email, there's nothing. And then there was a sentence again that I thought was kind of strange, and it says the program utilizes evidence-based curriculum proven to improve child outcomes. Like, what kind of outcomes? Like it almost, how are you improving a child? Or just it just sounds really strange the way it's written.
Yeah, it
So
feels very
Yeah, like
clinical.
think I would take
who
that
uses
completely
these
out.
words?
Yeah, it just seems very strange. So,
Very
That's fine.
jargony. Yeah.
Kyle?
We decided on this one that we would revise this because there is a ton of information in this that isn't needed. And there's also a lot of information missing, as Colleen mentioned. There is no information to get a hold of the intake coordinator. So if you're promising that someone's going to be there to help you, you need to have information about how to reach them. Also, we realized that the language in this is pretty technical and a lot of extremely large words to get through. If you're talking into lower income communities or lower literacy communities, this is going to be extremely hard to read through, and that's going to discourage people to even read past the first couple of lines. So this would make people who have a lower literacy level feel very overwhelmed and not want to participate in the program.
All right, looks like we got lots of hands jumping up. I think we have, Erica, how much time do we have? We have time for one or two
One
more?
more. Yeah, one more.
One more. I don't know who had their hand up first. I think maybe it was Cherry, but I'm not entirely sure.
I can go quickly. We talked about editing it and adding an image here to reflect, cultural humility and all the cultural pieces, and also expand on the word trained professionals. What does that mean, right? Are they nurses? Are they doulas? And thinking about that these people are going to go into their homes, and also similar things that Kyle just mentioned.
Thank
It's
you.
such great points. Like when I look at this, I start asking like, who is this written for? And like, who sounds like they wrote it? Evidence-based multiple times, curricula, all of those things. Like who uses these words? And so it's very jargon heavy too. And like others are saying, the power dynamics, the framing, the cultural aspect, it just feels off.
Erica, let's give Charles the last word here because he did such a
Go
good
for it.
job reading that prompt. We got to give him some airspace. Charles.
I'm basically saying the same thing. What we felt was this has to be a conversation like two neighbors over a fence between the two, as opposed to some fancy language that seems like it comes from somebody else. We want, as community health workers, to be on a level with people. We're working together for something, not somebody telling somebody else what to do. It's got to be clear so the neighbor next door knows what you're talking about.
Great take home, Charles. All right, Erica, take us home.
Awesome. So this activity revealed what everyone is bringing up in the chat and what they're sharing, that polish doesn't always equal connections. While both examples were grammatically perfect, well organized, sometimes that can make them worse and not better. And that polish can really create that distance that we're talking about. So voices matter. People can tell when something wasn't written by them and for them. And so community members are the experts at detecting kind of this outsider language, and we just need to be aware. And this activity helped us reveal that. And then lastly, the defaults are not always the best. We know that AI is trained on billions of documents, and most of them are institutional, professional, dominant culture texts. And so that's what it's reproducing, unless it's explicitly redirected. So the bottom line of this is that AI can be a tool. Again, like we've said, it can generate words, but only us humans can ensure that those words are honoring our relationships. We are coming up to the end of our session. We have 9 minutes left, but we didn't want to end this session without talking about how do we go from practice to policy. So we know that everything we've talked about today are really individual decisions, but you are working under your organizations, and a lot of times you have your own policies to abide to. So we wanted to create some space for folks who are thinking about developing policies and what you may look for. We're not going to get too deep into this, more so than just mention some key ingredients to think about, and then show some resources that you can look at your own time. But we know that organizations can jump straight to policy and get stuck in that technical language and that perfect compliance. But we wanted to emphasize that good AI policy does 3 things. It is principles first, and it's setting those expectations. It's defining boundaries around risk and helping staff make decisions when they're not clear. So as you're developing your policy, think about those principles. Establish those core values before you have any specific rules. What matters most to your teams and your organizations? You want to pilot carefully. You want to start with low risk internal use cases. You want to document what you learn, like we mentioned, and really use that to inform your policy before expanding. And then you want to revise regularly. So we know that AI is changing so rapidly, that, like folks mentioned on the call. So think about things like quarterly reviews to keep your policy relevant. We don't need to predict every future use case for AI, but you do need some clear principles and processes for making decisions. So just some ingredients. We're going to send you over a policy template and some others that folks have developed at HRIA with our colleagues at Kansas, and also other tools for nonprofits that show what are some of the key pieces to focus on in your policy. And some of the ingredients to make sure you're successful is having that scope and definition. So what does AI mean to you? What types of tools are included? You want to make sure to have some use categories. So what's encouraged, what's restricted, what's off limits. So again, thinking about our risk spectrum. You want to have some data privacy and guardrails that have clear boundaries of what can and can't be used. Accountability structure. Who's responsible when questions are going to come up, because they will come up. And then what is your learning and review process? We zoomed through that, but we want to make sure we have wrap up time. We will send this out in our follow-up email to you. 3 tools that I think are really helpful. The first is this template that Ben and I co-wrote along with our colleagues at Kansas Health Institute, which has a lot of vignettes, a lot of stipulations, a lot of template guidance that you can use as you're developing your policy. If it's too much, because we know it's a really lengthy document, Fast Forward does have this really cool nonprofit AI policy builder that's more of an ad libs kind of thing. So if you're in a rush, you need a good start, we'll direct you there. And then lastly, the Nonprofit Tech Engagement Network, NTEN, has a really great host of resources for nonprofits, along with templates, little videos that are very easy to digest. So we'll send that out, but we just wanted to plug those resources as you're thinking about going from practice to policy. All right, y'all, we've made it to the end of our journey. We so appreciate you sticking with us for 2 hours. If you take away anything from this webinar, we hope that it's that responsible AI use doesn't require perfection, but what it requires is care, and the care that you all already bring to your community work, and the willingness to slow down when something feels uncertain or risky. We focused on asking better questions, distinguishing low and high risk uses, and thinking about trust as a core outcome rather than an afterthought. So we hope that you're taking back today a framework for being able to assess AI risk. So think about those 5 questions that we walk through, questions to guide your decision making before you adopt use, practices and for responsible implementation, and again, these quick foundations that you can think about as you're developing your policy. And the last one is that recognition that restraint is also a form of possibility. The work is ongoing. The fact that you're here with us engaging, it matters deeply. We're so grateful. And community trust is built through our choices and not our tools. So before we exit and before we do the wrap up from the CHTI team, I just want folks to share in the chat a practice, a question that you're taking away from today. Write it down for yourself or drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Appreciate the feedback. And Katie and Victoria, I'm going to hand it over to you while folks are dropping their thoughts in the chat.
I want to thank Erica. I'm along for the ride for all of this, and it's fun for me to participate in it. Erica's the person who put all this together, so thank you, Erica.
No problem.
So impressed with you both. And Erica, yeah, amazing job developing this training. To continue wrapping us up while folks are dropping things into the chat, first and foremost, thank you to our facilitators for your knowledge, your questions and ponderings about AI. I think everyone will agree this was jam-packed with a lot of really tangible things that will certainly help me think about how AI will continue to show up in my day-to-day, how to pause, what some considerations should be, and how to continue prioritizing relationships with communities, which is the most important thing for us. Victoria will be dropping, thank you, Victoria, the feedback link into the chat as well. We would really appreciate 2 to 3 minutes of your time to fill that out. It really helps us continue to build these trainings in a way that's best for you all, because that's who it's for. Our next training is coming up on February 12th. At 1 p.m. and it's going to focus on cost-effective tips and tools to support strategic communications. Participants of that training will get to reflect on their own organizational needs and define at least one strategic communication goal, as well as learn about free or low-cost tools and strategies that can help you level up your communication game. Victoria will also drop that link into the chat, or you can register at our website. We hope to see you there. And then finally, if anybody has something they want us to highlight in our newsletter, on our LinkedIn, we love to spotlight stuff that your organizations are focused on. So please feel free to send things along. And we regularly post job openings, events and other things in those spaces. So please let us know what we can do to help elevate what you're working on. All right, I think that's it from me. Any other reflections that you all want to shout out from the chat?
No, just to note that Victoria dropped those URLs if you had any issues with the QR code. But here's our email. If you want to reach out to us, we thank you for your time, your commitment to doing this work with care, and it was really awesome to be in space with you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody, for being thoughtful participants, really leaning in. Thank you.